Hello, and welcome to Intro to Computer Networking. My name is David Young. I'm a student at Concordia University, Chicago, and in this series, we're talking about the fundamentals of computer networking. This is part two, where we're going to be talking about network components, the computing devices that make up the infrastructure which makes the internet function. And so when we talk about network components, we like to divide them into two groups, the network edge and the network core. And the network edge is sort of the outside of the internet, like the name edge might suggest. In the network edge, we have hosts. These are going to be the individual devices that are going to run internet applications that use the internet. So for instance, we have a cell phone that's going to run, for instance, a web browser or a weather app that's going to connect to the internet to get data about the weather. Similarly, a laptop might connect to the internet in order to access a website or download a file from some other source. But we also have things like servers. And so these provide a different function. And so we divide these devices that are on the network edge, these hosts, into two smaller categories. We have clients, and these are the user devices of the internet. These are what a human being is going most likely to interact directly with in order to use the internet. And they're going to provide a service to that user. And so some examples of network devices, these desktops down here, these are clients because they enable a human being to use the internet in a way that is meaningful to them. Similarly, we have laptops down here. Some further examples of clients are as follows. Got, of course, laptops and cell phones. But there's also home assistants like the Amazon Echo. As we're seeing more and more internet capabilities and they're becoming easier, we're seeing a lot more internet connected devices. And so things like the Amazon Echo represent a move towards a more connected world and a computing philosophy that connects more and more devices together. And we see this philosophy sort of manifested in smart fridges, which are an example of what might be called an Internet of Things. And the Internet of Things is a connection of devices that were previously not connected to the internet, but which are now connected in order to provide additional functionality. So a smart fridge might be able to tell you when you're running low on something and ping you when you go to the grocery store in order that you wouldn't forget that thing. We're also, and this is one of the most exciting, we're seeing cars beginning to be connected to the internet. Tesla's doing this a lot in their efforts to create self-driving cars. And so by connecting cars to the internet, you can connect them to each other and you can help them to communicate in a way that's going to avoid collisions and make self-driving cars a possibility. The network edge doesn't just have client devices, though. It also has servers. And these kind of constitute the back end of the internet. These are devices that are going to hold data or run programs that are going to be accessed by users, but they're not necessarily directly accessed by a user locally. So they're going to hold data that, for instance, a computer over here or a laptop might access, but they're not actually going to be interacted with directly by a human being. And so some examples of things that servers can accomplish are going to be as follows. We've got gaming. Whenever you've played an online video game, you're connected to a server, and that server is going to provide information about what's going on in the game. It's going to consolidate information together so that players can have interactions with each other that are governed by data within the server, and that you can keep track of your progress within the game and play across devices. Another example of a use of a server is going to be social media. I've picked X here, but there are plenty of other examples. These platforms need to host and maintain large amounts of data through posts and such. And so servers are going to be established to hold on to that data so that you can access it later. And then we have another example, which is Amazon Web Services. Web hosting is a big use of servers. It holds on to information about a website that can be accessed later. Amazon Web Services also has a cloud computing functionality. And cloud computing is computing that's done by a server. It's done in a way that's remote to the person using a laptop, for example, but it harnesses a lot of computing power and then transmits the results of that computation over the internet so that the user doesn't have to have a super beefy computer, but can connect to a beefy computer which can do the computations for them. And so this is another example where we're going to see a server. It's not directly interacted with, but it's interacted with by users via the internet, and it provides services to those clients across the internet. Access networks are also considered to be at the network edge. And these are going to connect your hosts into internet service providers. And internet service providers are simply the organizations that provide the broader, more regional or global infrastructure of the internet. Access nets, contrary to ISPs, are generally smaller, and they're managed by institutions. And so we're going to look at a few examples of access nets here. Home networks are an example of an access network. It's managed by a homeowner. And you'll see here that we have a connection to a central office. This is the central office of a larger internet service provider. And then within this house, within this home network, there's a hub. This is called a router or a switch. And this hub is connecting these computers directly. And it's also connecting to this Wi-Fi antenna, which is connecting wirelessly to this cell phone and this laptop and this fridge. So within this home, we have the most basic sort of hub through this router that's going to connect to the larger internet. And so we consider home networks to be examples of access nets because they bundle together devices and then connect them into the internet as a whole. We also have enterprise networks. These are similar to home networks, but with a couple of big differences. We see that we still have routers. These are hubs that are going to connect these devices. This is also how we're going to represent a switch. This is very similar to a router, but it generally is used for wired connections. And so we have all these devices connected to this switch, and then also this Wi-Fi antenna connected to this switch. But we also have over here servers. We don't typically see servers in home networks. And these servers are going to hold on to things like website information so that when someone is trying to look at an institution's website, they can have access to these servers which hold on to that website and then transmit it back to the user. And these servers might also handle institutional email so that when an email is sent internally within the institution, it doesn't have to be sent out into the vast internet, but it can just be sent locally and moved around in this server so that the people who need to access it can access it. And then, of course, this is the link to the broader ISP, which is going to provide that regional and global connectivity, as we talked about in part 1. Mobile networks are similar, but they're also different, and they're often at a much larger scope. So we have, in a mobile network, we're going to have a cell tower, and this is going to have a range of tens of miles. And so this is going to connect from an ISP, and it's going to wirelessly connect to all of these devices in a way that's sort of similar to Wi-Fi, but with some major differences, namely range. And so all these devices can be connected remotely. And then through this connection to the cell tower, they can access the internet. And this is generally slower than Wi-Fi or a wired connection, but it's useful when you have a very spread out area. That's going to be the end of part A of part 2 of our computer networking discussion. I hope to see you again next time.